Hi, I'm Michael Killen, host of the Killen Report. For 10 years, an organization in Coronado has been lobbying extensively for a tax or fee on carbon fuels. And I'm wondering, in the era of Trump, what is going to happen to the effort to put a tax on fossil fuel? And I have invited a group leader of Citizen Climate Lobby. His name is Suds, Jain, to be on this show, and I want to ask him a series of questions. First, about what is the mission and objective of Citizen Climate Lobby, and then I might get around to asking him, how will the emergence of Donald Trump as the President of the United States affect that nonprofit's direction? And then I've invited Peter Fiekowsky, who is on the board of a Sausalito-based company, RePower Capital, and he's also on a board for an organization called the 100-Year Climate Change Plan. I'm going to invite him to come on this show also. Now, before I start my interview with Suds Jain, I want to make an announcement. Recently, I was in Marin County in California, and I produced a TV program called How Nonprofits Can Increase Their Revenue. If you go to my website, Killen, Killen.com, you will have an opportunity to pick up the insights that the father of cause marketing share in that program. Suds.
How are you, Michael?
Hey, how are you today?
Good.
By the way, you're the first guest I've had that has less hair than me. I'm happy with how much hair I have, or don't have. You heard my introduction of Citizens Climate Lobby. And first of all, what do you think of the introduction?
Well, I think everyone is concerned about what the Trump administration is going to do about climate. He has called it a great hoax, but he's been fairly unpredictable about a lot of things. So it's possible that Citizens Climate Lobby and other people may be able to move him to become a huge advocate for climate.
Okay, I like what you said, and maybe we'll come back in this interview to issues related to Trump. Now, although many people have brought Citizen Climate Lobby to my attention over the years, but I'd like to ask you, what is the mission of that nonprofit?
The mission is to create a solution to tackle the pollution caused by carbon emissions. And we have a proposal for a fee, or some people call it a carbon tax, which is basically a price on carbon pollution, where we return all of the money back to citizens. So Citizens Climate Lobby is a nonpartisan nonprofit whose mission is to create the political will to get a price on carbon pollution.
I like how you said that, because you did include sort of the method that the mission is presenting, and it's a legislative mission, right?
Correct.
Okay, and now I'd like to ask, why in the world should we bother to put a tax on carbon?
So even the EPA and the Supreme Court have realized that carbon emissions are a pollutant. And just like we don't let chemical companies any longer dump their wastes into our river, we should not allow electric utilities and refineries and large manufacturers to use our air as basically a sewer for this pollutant that the EPA and the Supreme Court have recognized.
We're in California, and we have one of the world's great bread baskets in the Central Valley. We provide a tremendous amount of food. We have a lot of farmers. What does it matter to farmers if us people in the cities put up all the pollution that you just referred? What does it matter to farmers?
Well, I'm actually a master gardener, so I'm very interested in gardening. And I had to chop down my cherry tree this year because what's happening is with global warming, we're not getting enough chill hours. So cherry trees need anywhere from 600 to 900 hours of cold temperature in the wintertime before they recognize that winter is over and that it's time to bloom. So I haven't gotten any fruit on my cherry trees. A number of farmers in this area have not been able to get fruit, and so we're now having to look at even using some tropical fruits. So we're going to have to change the fruit that we're going to use, plus we have this drought.
So from what you just said, the warming of the temperature in California has a great impact on the farmers in this state. Do you agree?
Absolutely. For two reasons. One is, again, the temperature is changing, so certain crops are no longer fruiting. Then the other thing is that because the temperature is warming, we don't have the snowpack storage that we used to. So there's a shortage of water.
A shortage of water.
Yeah.
That is a gigantic issue in this state.
Absolutely.
And is it more than just being concerned with the snowpack melting, providing enough water, and providing it when it's needed? But are there other related water issues that you believe impact the farmers in this state?
Well, one of the things is that as you heat up a planet, and we call it the greenhouse effect because it works just like a greenhouse. CO2 basically blankets the Earth, and it's basic physics that it, just like glass, lets in visible and doesn't let heat or infrared out. CO2 does the same things. So the planet's getting warmer. That's causing more evaporation. So we have 7% more moisture in the air. When it comes down in deluges, which are floods. So farmers have issues with drought and floods.
Okay, and I would like to ask a question related to that and NASA. Okay, I was fortunate to work on a little project with Steve Hipskin, the head of Earth Sciences for NASA Ames. And we teamed up to create an event where NASA would have a chance to discuss somewhat intimately the water issues that farmers face. And this brought John Lair, the Secretary of Resources for the state of California. And being involved, and I was basically just a bystander, I was a speaker, or whatever, I learned that NASA has invested a considerable amount of money and had great interest in providing more and more important data to the state to help the state assist the farmers in meeting their needs for water. And then I read in the paper a while ago that Trump followers and maybe some Republicans, and who knows, maybe some Democrats, they're threatening to cut the funding to NASA for anything to do with gaining knowledge, insights about the impact, or the development and also the impact of climate change. What do you think about cutting NASA's budget?
I think it's a horrible mistake. I mean, these people refuse to fund science, which advances human knowledge and I mean, if you look at California, we're technology based, right? Most of our, Silicon Valley jobs are all technology based. a lot of them came from work that was done in basic labs in the federal government, federally funded labs. So for us to basically bury our heads in the sand and say we don't want the information because that might contradict what we want to believe is a horrible mistake. And fortunately, our governor, Jerry Brown, has said, well, if the federal government's going to stop doing this, we're going to do the research. And I applaud him for that.
Okay, I'm sure the farmers love hearing that. And then I want to acknowledge that I know you know Assemblyman Rich Gordon.
I do.
And I know you are in the sphere of political activism, and especially in the Santa Clara area. And I remember being with Rich Gordon, and he was working on helping us appreciate the threat of sea level rise. And from those discussions, I discovered that there is the fear that there'll be a big storm, the moon will be in a certain position, and the ocean waters will come up all the way to the delta, can come all the way up to the delta,
Correct.
and flood it with seawater. And it could break dams, and the water might even go into down south into the Central Valley, destroying much of the economy, the farming, the agricultural economy of the state. And what do you think? Is that really feasible, that sea level rise could push all the way into the delta? And is that linked to the governor's plan to put a new tunnel in?
Well, the fundamental issue is with sea level rise, salt water moves up the delta, and plants can't tolerate the salt. So farmers are dealing with salinity issues, which are destroying their crops. I think it will be a number of years before it breaks dams and moves into the Central Valley. I mean, historically, we did have sea levels that were 100 feet higher than they are now, but we're not expected to have more than, say, 7 or 8 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century.
Okay, so now I'd like to go back to Citizen Climate Lobby.
Sure.
You gave us the mission, I can grasp that, but what's the number one objective or number two objective or three objectives that the nonprofit that you are part of is trying to attain?
So the objective is to create legislation, federal legislation. California and the states in the Northeast have their own cap and trade systems or carbon pricing systems, but the best way to do it is something that is national. We don't like to have a mismatch of legislation piecemeal, because then states compete with each other. It's better to have a consistent carbon price across the whole country. So what we're asking for is a steadily increasing price on carbon pollution, which starts at the primary source, which is when coal or oil is extracted from the ground or imported into the United States. So we want to start at something like $15 a ton and increase it very steadily every year, $10 a ton.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Something businesses can predict and rely on.
Okay, predictability for businesses,
Correct.
governments,
Yeah.
all of us in life is important. And now you said, was it $15 a ton?
Yeah.
Okay, and of gas.
This is $15 a ton on any carbon CO2 equivalent emission. So
Okay.
that $15, if you want to boil it down, translates to about 15 cents per gallon of gasoline.
15 cents per gallon of gasoline is what's going to be a new expense we all have to pay. Well, that's fine. But let me just ask you, you don't want to call it a tax, you want to call it a fee. How can you call it a fee if it's going to be a tax on my gasoline usage? Do I get a rebate?
You do. what happens is that as the fossil fuel is imported into the country or extracted from the ground, there's this fee placed on it. That money would go into a separate fund that would not be commingled with the general fund of the United States. And then that money will then be divided among, could be anyone with a Social Security number, or it could be any legal resident of the United States. That's not decided yet, but we divide it and we return it back, every penny. Yeah. So it doesn't grow government, it doesn't decide on any technologies, it doesn't bet on any technologies. You know, a lot of people have issues with the fact that the US government funded Solyndra. We're not doing that with this. We're returning it back to consumers.
Okay. Now, I've learned from you earlier that George Schulz, the famous, one of the most famous, important Republicans we've had, is on your board.
He is.
And what is his exact position with respect to the distribution of funds collected?
He and a fellow named Gary Becker, who's a Nobel Prize economist, wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal where they proposed support for a revenue-neutral carbon tax. And his statement is, it's not a tax if the government doesn't keep the money. So returning it all to consumers is something that he believes is something that would price in the external cost of this pollution. Because we, like I said, we don't allow companies to dump their pollution in the rivers. They have to pay more to responsibly dispose of those toxic wastes. Okay. So we want to price the cost of this pollution.
So it's a neutral cost to me. It's nothing.
Right.
I mean, if I get the benefit, if I'm a farmer, of maybe having a career and continue to make money if we reduce the emissions going up.
Correct.
And then us consumers, yes, we pay 15 cents more maybe for a gallon. We pay right now, but at the end of the year, we may get a tax deduction for the amount of money or a check or something. Sounds like a good deal to me.
In fact, people who have small carbon footprints, people who live in apartments, take public transit, they make out because they get the same check that somebody who has multiple houses and lots of European vacations. Everyone gets the same check. So in effect, people with very large carbon footprints would be subsidizing people with small carbon footprints.
Okay, now you've been helpful on that topic. One more question related to this. Trump, I didn't do it deliberately. He changes the environment considerably. And it's not certain to me that Congress is going to go along with him or go along with Citizen Climate Lobby. We don't know really what he's going to do. He's already said he doesn't believe in climate change, and he's put people in charge of EPA and other places that call it a farce, a Chinese invention. Do you think you're going to get any support from him or from the Congress during his 4-year administration, if he lasts that long, to get a tax fee legislated? What do you folks think about that?
Well, the way Citizens Climate Lobby works is we create groups in every congressional district, and we meet with congressmen and women on both sides of the aisle regularly to talk about this proposal and the threat of carbon pollution to our lifestyles, our economy. And we meet with very conservative congresspeople, and many of them will privately admit that they understand this, yeah, but they're concerned about getting reelected. And so one of the examples is Trump has golf courses along the water, and he's building seawalls to protect from climate change. So it's possible that he gets it, but he's just not willing to publicly say.
Okay. I would like to briefly shift this discussion for a moment. Now, you are in the city of Santa Clara.
Correct.
one of the most important cities in Silicon Valley. And I know you are a local activist, having to do with trying to encourage the city to be more progressive, more active in reducing the threat and impact of greenhouse gases. And I think you or someone, you told me that you have some initiatives that you have been promoting. Can you just, these are green initiatives, could you just quickly tell us one, two, or three of them?
Yeah, so as you probably know, that Governor Schwarzenegger signed AB 32, which is the greenhouse gas legislation. And in that legislation, they ask every city to create a climate action plan to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. And the concept is to get down to 1990 levels of CO2 emissions by 2020. So every city has a climate action plan.
So one of your objectives that you've been pushing the city to enact or support, one.
Okay, so what I've been trying to do is to get the city to install more electric vehicle chargers, because we need to, as we decarbonize our grid, we want to push electric cars that won't be emitting greenhouse gases. So I'm trying to get in every housing development lots of EV chargers,
Good.
in public facilities, EV chargers.
And my next car is going to be an electric car.
Okay, very good.
And now I want to say you've been a wonderful guest. And I was wondering if you just sit here for a moment. I'd like to invite Peter Fiekowsky. Did I pronounce it properly?
Fiekowsky.
Fiekowsky. Okay. Peter, would you come on and join us? Have a seat.
Hey,
Thank
Peter.
you. Good seeing you again.
And Peter, make sure I get this right. You are on the board of a Sausalito-based organization called RePower Capital.
Yes.
And you're also on the board of an organization called the 100-Year Climate Change Plan.
Yeah, well, the 100-year plan is part of Citizens Climate Lobby. When I began working with Citizens Climate Lobby, I wanted to make sure that I was lined up with the outcome that we wanted. And it turned out that no one had answered the question, where do we want the climate to go? No one had answered that question. So over a period of about three years, I had a chance to talk with all the leading climate experts to ask them, where should we take the climate? And at the end, we decided that where we want the climate to end up is with a healthy climate. We actually want to get back to 0 degrees warming. And I was talking to a bishop at the climate summit in Marrakech a couple months ago. And he said, Peter, it's a moral imperative to give our children the same climate our parents gave us. And so what I've been working on is, in the 100-year plan group, is actually saying where do we want to go and how might we get there?
Okay, so I want to say I like the phrase, but it's more than a phrase, to give our children the climate that we may have inherited. Is that right?
That's right.
How does that ring with people when you share that mission?
That
goal.
I've shared it with a lot of people, and it comes universally, people like it. It's a little bit scary because for the most part we don't know how to do it. And but I've had no one object to it. I'm a physicist by training, and until November, until the bishop talked to me, I was doing it as a scientific thing, that scientifically it's better to do it.
Good.
That was there were arguments there. When the moral imperative, people are very happy with that.
Good. Now, you heard the discussion Suds and I had here, okay?
Yeah.
What don't you like about it? How would you improve it? What did we miss?
What did you miss? The big picture is very exciting. When we, in looking at the 100-year plan, it turns out that the carbon tax, putting a price on carbon, is of course important for accelerating our transition to clean energy. and I like the chargers and so on. But it's very powerful beyond that, that putting a price on carbon is the thing that's missing for us to motivate industry to pull carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere in the future. And so I'm very active with CCL to get that price on carbon, because not only is it good in the short term as we do the transition, it's vital to give our children a planet that we'd be proud to give them.
All right. I like all that you said. I'd just like to go to RePower Capital for a moment. We don't have much time. What do you do with them, or what is their mission?
Their mission is to connect the investors and renewable project developers so that ultimately it may be $1 trillion a year, but certainly right now it's $300 billion a year that goes into buildings, wind and solar projects, and waste to energy and so on. It's hard to fund those. There's a lot of knowledge. And so what we do is we're the conduit for that hundreds of billions of dollars.
So you're on the board, and since you are a scientist, a heavy-duty scientist, are you primarily sharing your background, your knowledge, your experience I know you run a semiconductor company too.
Yeah.
Is that your role, to provide the technology?
My role, well, I'm an investor, but my main role has been to raise the bar for them. They wanted to make a good business and be profitable, and I said, my children need us to do $300 billion eventually, which is 10 times what the original plan was.
Okay, so you are in Los Gatos, California.
Los Altos.
Oh, Los Altos, and you are in Santa Clara. And did I pronounce your name properly?
Fiekowsky.
Fiekowsky.
Fiekowsky. Fiekowsky.
Oh, Fiekowsky.
Yes.
So, and your Suds, and how do you pronounce your first name, the full first name?
Sudhanshu.
Say it again, please.
Sudhanshu.
Okay. So I want to say both of you were an enjoyment for me to chat with you. And you shared some valuable information with the community, and I want to thank you very much. And in a moment, they're going to go like this to me, back there, and say it's all over. So thank you, thank you.
Michael.
Thank you very much.
Michael Killen. Just sit for a minute. Now, wasn't that